how to reliably calculate your fix and flip after repaired values. This is really serious, guys. You could walk by a property and not even realize that's a good deal because you don't know what it's going to really sell for. Knowing how to do this can make the difference between finding a deal and losing a deal and not even knowing something was a deal in the beginning. What you guys are going to learn today is a step-by-step guide on getting accurate comps. The most common mistake when choosing a property, my expert tip on determining the right areas to invest in. There's a process to reliably calculate values. First thing you've got to do is determine your neighborhood. Then you've got to select your sold comps. Then you've got to select your active comps. Then you've got to determine your final value. That's the steps that we've got to do. So one of the things that you're going to want to use is a property value analysis sheet. This is a copy of one that helps you make a determination and sort through things. The first thing it's going to do is it's going to help you in determining your neighborhood. So some idea is to determine the natural barriers no more than a mile away. So we're looking for looking for what's there. So we can type in an address and take a quick look at any of those properties. So for example, let me just show you a property that we can talk about here, or talk about a property. So here is a property in Dallas, Texas. What I'm going to do is just kind of zoom in here. So this is interesting, guys. So this kind of tells you some neighborhoods. And if you want to look at some analytics here, you can look at some different values, estimated values. This can kind of help you understand the difference in values, okay? So you can clearly see here that homes on this side are going for more money than homes on this side, and you can see this is more expensive because it's a darker color in here. So when you have a house like this is an interesting one, right? Because it's on a busy street. You can see this is a different neighborhood than this. So a house over here, and this is where a lot of people get in trouble. They'll find a house on this side, and they'll try and price it using the other side pricing. And that's no good because this is worth more than these properties. And so that's what we're trying to make some determination is what are some natural boundaries here. So you can see these houses are not selling for quite as much. And you can also see this is on more of a busy street, with commercial property across, well, a church, across, that type of stuff. So that's where you start getting into some natural barriers. So these major streets are natural barriers. I don't see, like a lake or a river or something like that. If this came down, you're like, hey, this is, that's an airport there. But there's natural barriers here when you're dealing with some of these streets. The other thing that you can look at is MLS statistics. You could look at MLS value. Or you could look at square footage. This is also an interesting way to look at this. You can clearly see here that these properties are bigger properties than these properties, but some of these are actually big properties. But look, if I come back to estimated value, these houses are bigger, but they're not selling for as much money as these houses are over on this other side, okay? So that's what you're dealing with here. And so that's where this knowledge is actually power in making sure that you understand what's happening. That's when I start putting my barriers together. And what I wanna do is I wanna come in and say, these are my natural boundaries, okay? I don't wanna come any further than this road here because I can see that's where the more expensive houses are actually coming. And for this property, since it is on a busy street, I am open to taking some of the comps on this other direction over here. So I can come in and say, I've got this boundary, and I just list out those streets. That's what I want to be doing so that I can understand the boundaries and what I'm dealing with. So the other thing I can look at here is I can look, let me get you all the way over here. Okay, so you can look at estimated values per square foot. You can zoom in, see where those change, make the note of those natural barriers. One of the things we talked about here is total value. So you can click on analytics, estimate value, and zoom in. We looked at this as well. So the other thing you can look at is price growth. We didn't talk about price growth as much. So one of the things we can look at here is the price growth and what's happened. And the growth over the last 6 months. So we can just zoom out. What's interesting with this, you're going to see everything grew except for this area is a little spotty in here. So you got to ask yourself, man, why is this area not having as much growth as some of these areas? If you look at our key here, you can see that they're not growing as much. And if you zoom out even more, it can become even more apparent when we're looking at some of the values. So those are things to look at. With the market, the way that it's been so crazy, it's the price growth is not going to be quite as easy for us to make a consideration for, but it's something that we can use depending upon what market we're actually in. Mark on property values analysis where the neighborhood is. So you want to look at the roads, you want to look at the rivers, you want to look at the railroad tracks, where are the points where the values actually change. Then you document this and say, these are my natural boundaries. Then you select your sold comps and your active comps. This is the next step we're moving into here. You click on the address in the in the box, and this will open property details for you. So I'm going to jump back to kind of give you an idea here. So if I come here and I've got the property, I can come and I can take a look at all the details, and one of those is comparables and nearby listings. This can tell me everything that's going on with the property. And I can look at MLS, I can look at just public records, or I can look at both MLS and public records. I can come and sort my distances. I can sort everything that I want here, as well as sorting the amount. So I can take a really good look at what things are actually selling for, and I can change my square footage. I can change my date range. I can change all that type of stuff just right here. Okay, comparables and nearby listings. You click on the MLS, change it. Understand the date range. Now, I like to start the last 6 months, okay? That's what I like to start with, is the last 6 months. 3 months is even better, but 6 months. And square footage, 20% give or take, larger or smaller is what I like to start with. As a distance, I like to start with a half mile. I may make that smaller or make that bigger if I need to. Property class, you want to select sold properties, and then we'll go back and look at actives as well. And then we look at the map and determine what comparables are in the same neighborhood as that area we already established. Remember, guys, we established that area already. So we want to then go back and look at that. Click on MLS and go from low to high. So I start with the least expensive and work my way to the most expensive. So you click on each property to open a new tab. You look at the beds, the baths, the square footage. You look at the pictures to understand the condition. One of the cool things we've got is, let me jump back over here. One of the cool things you can do on these properties is you can actually see the pictures on the property. And so you can know what that condition of the property is actually in. So I can click here and I can go through and say, hey, this property just sold. Is my house going to look like this house? Let's look at the interior. Is this in good shape? Is it in poor shape? Has it been recently remodeled? What do they do? So you can get a really good feel, which is important as we're trying to value properties. It's important to know what we are actually comparing the property to. And so with that, then we can, let's come back to, there we go. So we start with the least expensive. So we click on each property, open it in a new tab. We look at bedrooms and baths and square footage. We compare that to our properties. We look at pictures to help understand the condition. We look at MLS sold notes from the agent. That's one of the really cool things that you can do in Investor's Edge, is you can look at MLS details. Here you can say, wow, 2 houses on one, ready to move in, nice size home, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, 1 story, updated, include roof, interior, exterior paint, water heater, plumbing, wood floor throughout, carpet, also has detached garage which has been remodeled, includes a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom living room, kitchen, guest rental, huge backyard with a deck, let's see here, fence, blah, blah, blah. I mean, what did this thing sell for? Let's just look. Sold for $190,000 and it was sat on the market for 106 days, and it sold 10/21. So that's interesting. So that could be an opportunity. Was an opportunity for somebody. Okay, so you look at the notes, you document details in the comps worksheet, you determine if it's an as-is, FHA, or ARV. So I basically bucket every property into three things. As-is means the property is in need of work. FHA means it's the minimum standard to get FHA, and ARV means it's been fixed up, like that house we just looked at or talked about, where it's got the new roof and the new kitchen and that type of stuff. And so I bucket all of them into one of those three. Then what I do is I select the two best comps. Then I'm starting with the lowest. I select the two best that meet the same criteria. What I'm asking myself is my property going to turn into this property? If I do the repairs, will it look like this? If so, then that's going to be a good comp. Then I look at the highest and say, what's the highest I think I can possibly get? So the two lowest that are in good condition, fixed up, that'll be the same as what my property will look like once it's done, and the one highest that's going to look like my property once that is done. Once I go through that, I do the exact same process for active properties. So I go through and I go through the MLS, I look at public records, I look in the last 6 months, everything's still the same here, but I look at active and pending. I'm not looking at the sold comps because I want a couple of sold comps, 3 sold comps, and 3 active comps. I determine the neighborhood. I should have already done that with the sold properties, and so I don't have to necessarily do that again. I start with the least expensive, just like we did before. This is the same process that I'm using, but I'm looking for active homes rather than sold homes. Again, I'm looking for the 2 best comps and the 1 highest comp and the 2 best comps. When I say best comps, I start with the lowest and I work my way back up. Now, here's the trouble that you can get yourself into is what if you don't have enough comparables? What do? Well, you can increase the area from a half a mile to 0.75 to 1 mile, okay? You can increase the date range from 6 months to 12 months, or even 9 months. You can start increasing those things. You start by looking at the neighborhood and determining if you can increase the distance, if that affects your value, as we talked about the different values. If it does affect the value, then you want to increase the date range. And you do the same process until you can actually get comps. If you've gotten to 1 mile and 12 months and there's not enough comps, you need to make some adjustments. The area is going to be very hard to determine a solid value unless you make some of those adjustments, and that can be very scary when you're making some of those. Because the best thing you've got is if there's houses across the street that just sold that are in similar condition, that's going to be the easiest way for me to determine value. Now, to determine that final value, you want to look at all of the comps. You want to determine the range. What are properties selling from this range to this range? You want to help with the final value, but based on the repairs once it's actually fixed up. You want to compare to your comparables. Will my house look like this house? If the answer is yes, great, maybe it's a good comparable. If the answer is no, then you've got to find a different comparable or increase what you're planning on doing to your specific property. But there's also some risk factors that you've got to consider here. And one of them is remember Burger King. If you are not familiar, I bought a house a couple doors down from a Burger King. I didn't think it'd be that big of an issue. I thought for $10,000 less, somebody would be willing to live across the street from a Burger King or a few doors down from a Burger King. What I found out is people don't like smelling Whoppers in the morning, and they don't like to get a neon tan from the Burger King sign. And I found that property more difficult to sell than what I anticipated because it's really hard to say what will somebody else be willing to take as a discount in order to do that. It's very hard to put a number on that, and that's what adjustments are. At a low enough price, somebody will pay for it, but knowing how much is risky and your buyer's pool shrinks down. There's a lot fewer buyers that would be willing to live across from Burger King than there are that don't want to live across from Burger King and say, I don't care if I'm getting a good deal. I don't want to live across from Burger King no matter what. So you're dealing with fewer people that are actually potential buyers. It's best to have little to no risk factors. The more risk factors, the more risk you're taking on in that investment. So let's talk about some of the most common risk factors. One of them is boarded up homes. If a home is vacant, banks or owners will put boards over the windows and doors to protect it from vandalism of the home. If you see boarded up properties, you should be concerned. Why is the house sitting and not sold? What is the demand in the area? Are there concerns about high crime in the area? Next one is a busy street. Keep in mind that anytime there's a double yellow line on the road indicating speeds over 30 miles per hour, you are increasing your risk factor. Next thing is commercial properties. This could be the Burger King or a warehouse. Very few people grow up hoping to buy a home next to a warehouse. So you've got to make some compensating factor based upon those, or your comps have to be in the same properties, have to be facing the Burger King as well, or right across the street or right on the street from the warehouse. Apartment complexes just means more active traffic, not as much pride of ownership. Those are things to be concerned about. High rental area, highest resale is selling to homeowners, not selling to landlords. Landlords will always pay less than what a homeowner would be willing to. If the area is primarily tenant-based, you'll have less pride of ownership, more investor buyers, lower price of resale, and fewer homeowner buyers. Now, I want to pause here for just a minute, guys, because just because it has these risk factors doesn't mean it's a deal killer, but you got to make sure you're getting a good enough deal. I see a lot of new investors that get excited about a property because they think it's a good deal, but they don't take into consideration these risk factors, which will have an impact on the price you're going to be able to sell the property for. So you've got to be very careful when you're doing these and take that all into consideration as well. So the next thing is the area primarily tenant-based? We talked about that. Let's jump into crime here for just a minute. High crime areas have two risks. Number one, there's the risk of vandalism that most insurance companies don't cover on a rehab project. And there's also the risk that it's just simply harder to sell. So that's the other risk that you've got to be taking into consideration as well. Now, just a note, my rule of thumb is if I wouldn't let my wife walk down the street alone at night, I don't want to buy that home, or I don't want to invest in that neighborhood. That's my rule of thumb. That has done really well for me, and I see a lot of people taking on those risks and getting themselves in trouble. Now, for a quick pro tip, you can use crime reports or Zillow, where you can actually view the crime data and have an idea of what's happening for the crime in the area. Another thing you can do is actually call the police station and ask them for a report on the areas. They're typically happy to help, at least in most cases I've seen that. Train tracks. A train that interrupts sleep every night is going to have an impact on the value. If the home is in an urban area, a light rail could be a benefit rather than a detriment. So you've got to know the area. Non-conforming to the area. This could be a single family house in the middle of duplexes. That's not something people are going to get real excited about. All right, guys, we got a couple of comments I need to. Rhonda says, no, I have not, but I'm very interested in some of the auctions. That's fantastic. Curtis, I've never flipped a house and I'm nervous on making the first step, fearing that I mess up. You're going to mess up, Curtis. That's just kind of part of learning, right? When we learn to walk, we fell a lot. So I think lowering your expectations and just saying, you know, I am going to make some mistakes along the way. One of the things that can help you make fewer mistakes is something like our Find Fun Flip system. It's our complete system that takes brand new investors through flipping their first home. The idea here is you're using a system that others have used, has dozens of hours of training, deal finding software, access to 100% financing. If any of you are interested, check out DoHardMoney.com/get started. I hope that helps, Curtis. Fear false evidence appearing real. You got this, Curtis. Yeah, I love it. We can look up our own comps with Edge programs. Yes, with Investors Edge, you can look up your own comps. Sykes, I hope I'm saying your name right there, but thank you for your great comments. And yes, you can. Rigo says, great information. Thank you. You are very welcome. Thanks for being with us today. So check out DoHardMoney.com/get started.